The Galactic Summit had gathered in the Grand Hall of the Unified Council, a place where history was shaped, wars were avoided, and civilizations debated their futures. Massive pillars of polished obsidian stretched to a ceiling so high that entire starships could fit within. The air shimmered with holographic displays of star maps, economic projections, and fleet movements. Representatives of over 100 species were in attendance, each seated in their designated sections, their languages translated by omnipresent AI systems. At the center of it all, standing before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, was the human president. For decades, humanity had sought diplomacy, struggling to earn respect among the more ancient and established empires. They had extended peaceful offers, sought trade agreements, and participated in joint scientific ventures. Yet, in the eyes of the Galactic Union, humans were nothing more than an ambitious nuisance, primitive creatures barely scratching the surface of interstellar politics. And now, their patience had finally run out. A towering figure with jet-black scales and piercing yellow eyes leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of conquest. High Chancellor Vorzal of the Zeltar Dominion, ruler of one of the most powerful factions in the galaxy, regarded the human leader with something between amusement and contempt. "You do not belong here," Vorzal sneered, his mandibles clicking. "For too long, we have tolerated your kind. You are reckless, unpredictable, and worst of all, dangerous to yourselves. And now you stand before us, demanding that we reconsider our stance?" He scoffed, turning to the other leaders. "The humans believe they are our equals." "How amusing!" A ripple of laughter spread through the assembly. Some, like the reptilian Tirshak, chortled openly. Others, like the cold, insected Vesker, merely hummed in amusement. The human president, until now silent, slowly clasped his hands together. His face betrayed no emotion. "I am not here to demand," he said simply. His voice was calm, steady, unwavering. The laughter faltered. Vorzal's amusement flickered into irritation. "Then what, exactly, do you hope to achieve? You requested this summit to negotiate, yet you bring no bargaining chips. No fleets capable of challenging our own. No technological edge that threatens us. You are alone. Weak. The Galactic Union has already decided, humanity's expansion must be contained." A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall. The decision had been made before the meeting had even begun. This was not a discussion, it was an announcement of fate. But the president did not react. He let the words hang in the air for a moment, weighing them as if considering his next move. Then, slowly, he pushed back his chair and rose to his feet. The movement was subtle, but it commanded attention. "You misunderstand something very important," he said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. "For years we have asked for peace. We have come to these meetings, listened to your terms, compromised when necessary, and swallowed our pride when humiliated. We hoped that reason would prevail. That we could find our place among you without conflict." His eyes, cold and sharp, scanned the room, meeting the gaze of every ruler, every ambassador, every warlord seated before him. "But reason," he continued, his tone hardening, "only works when both sides are willing to listen." The hall grew silent. Humanity has spent the last 100 years proving itself, through diplomacy, through science, through cooperation. And yet, no matter what we do, you see us as nothing more than an inconvenience. A pest to be managed. He leaned forward slightly. "So now we make ourselves clear. We are done talking." A heavy stillness settled over the room. Some leaned forward, suddenly uneasy. Others exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from arrogance to something more uncertain. Vorzal narrowed his eyes. "What are you saying?" The president exhaled slowly. And then, with a finality that shook the room, he said the words that would alter the course of galactic history. "Enough talking. Let's start the war." The effect was immediate. Shock rippled through the assembly like a physical force. The air itself seemed to crackle with the weight of the declaration. No one had expected this, not from the species that had spent decades pleading for diplomacy. An ambassador from the Zorati coalition, a species known for their analytical minds, leaned forward in disbelief. You can't be serious. A full-scale war against the Union? You would be annihilated before your fleets even left your home system. The president tilted his head slightly, considering the statement. Then, a small, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of his lips. You assume we haven't been preparing for this. Vorzal slammed a fist onto the table, his claws gouging deep into the polished stone. You would throw away your species' survival over a wounded ego? The president's expression remained unreadable. You mistake patience for weakness. You mistake kindness for submission. That is why you will lose. The Zeltar leader bared his fangs, his temper fraying. You are alone in this fight. Do you understand that? No one will come to your aid. The president finally turned to leave, his final words spoken over his shoulder. We don't need anyone. With that, he walked out of the chamber, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The leaders of the Galactic Union sat frozen, processing what had just occurred. A sense of unease crept into their bones. The humans were not posturing. This was not a desperate bluff. For the first time, they had seen something terrifying in the eyes of a species they had dismissed for too long. Conviction. And deep down, in the darkest corners of their minds, a single, unthinkable possibility began to form. What if humanity could actually win? The moment the human president walked out of the summit, a single encrypted command was transmitted across vast distances, reaching every major human fleet, every hidden military installation, every intelligence network that had been silently waiting for this moment. There was no confusion, no hesitation. Humanity had planned for this war long before the Galactic Union even realized it was coming. The response was immediate. Across Earth and its colonies, sirens wailed as military protocols shifted from defense to full-scale mobilization. Factories that had once produced civilian ships retooled themselves in hours, switching to warship production. AI-driven logistics networks activated pre-programmed contingencies, rerouting resources to fuel a war machine the galaxy had never seen before. The Galactic Union, however, still operated under the assumption that humanity was weak. When the Zeltar Dominion dispatched their vanguard fleet toward Sol, they did so with absolute confidence. It wasn't an armada, just a fraction of their might, enough to serve as a lesson, a demonstration of how easily humanity could be crushed. It was a mistake they would not live to regret. The Zeltar ships emerged from slip space just outside Pluto's orbit, their weapons already primed to annihilate any resistance. Their commanders expected a feeble response, perhaps a few human warships scrambling in a desperate attempt to hold them back. Instead, they were met with a silence that felt unnatural. Then, without warning, the void around them came alive. Stealth human vessels, long hidden in the outer system, decloaked in perfect synchronization. They weren't arranged in traditional formations. They were spread apart, operating independently yet moving as one, a swarm, each ship calculating its own optimal trajectory, adjusting to the enemy's formation in real time. They did not give the Zeltar time to react. The first volley was devastating. Thousands of high-velocity kinetic rounds shredded through alien hulls before shields could even be raised. Advanced railgun platforms stationed on Pluto and Neptune fired precision shots, tearing apart command vessels with cold efficiency. The Zeltar had relied on energy-based weaponry, assuming brute force was the key to victory. Humanity had spent decades perfecting a different philosophy: speed, precision, and overwhelming tactical superiority. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks as their formation collapsed within minutes. Their ships were built for large-scale engagements, for battles fought in predictable formations. They had never encountered an opponent who fought like this, who turned the battlefield into a chaotic, ever-shifting nightmare. As Zeltar reinforcements scrambled to adjust, the true horror of human warfare revealed itself. AI-driven cyber warfare units launched an assault not on the enemy's ships, but on their systems. Communication links were hijacked. Targeting systems were subtly altered. Within moments, Zeltar vessels began firing on each other, believing they were under attack from invisible threats. Then came the boarding operations. Human strike teams, clad in adaptive exosuits, breached enemy hulls with surgical precision. They did not storm corridors blindly. They moved like shadows, disabling key infrastructure, severing power lines, venting entire sections into space. The Zeltar had expected brute force invasions. Instead, they found themselves hunted from the inside, their ships becoming their own tombs. By the time the battle ended, not a single Zeltar vessel remained operational. Some had been destroyed outright, others had been seized and turned against their former masters. A few survivors, their minds shattered by the sheer brutality of the encounter, were left alive for one purpose only: to return to their superiors and deliver a message. The humans were not prey. They were predators. Word of the battle reached the Galactic Union before the wreckage had even cooled. The response was immediate panic. Humanity had been underestimated, but surely they could not sustain such warfare. Surely this was a desperate, last stand, an anomaly. But deep within classified human military command centers, vast war simulations were running in real time, adjusting tactics with each passing second. The galaxy still believed in fleet supremacy, in massive battles where sheer numbers dictated victory. Humanity had no interest in fighting on those terms. They would not meet enemy fleets in predictable engagements. They would strike from the shadows. Unmanned drone fleets were already en route to enemy supply lines, programmed to operate independently, disrupting logistics and cutting off reinforcements before they could even reach the battlefield. Deep space relay stations, thought to be secure, suddenly fell silent as sleeper agents activated long-hidden sabotage protocols. On the Zeltar homeworld, chaos began to unfold. The war had barely started, yet entire colonies found themselves disconnected from their governing bodies. The Zeltar military, once an unshakable force, faced an invisible enemy, one that never attacked where expected, that disrupted infrastructure before battles even began. The Galactic Union scrambled to understand. How had humanity built such a war machine in secret? How had they developed technology capable of countering empires that had existed for thousands of years? The answer was simple. They had never stopped preparing. While the Union dismissed them, humanity had been studying. While others saw them as weak, they had adapted. The galaxy had spent too long fighting predictable wars. Humanity had learned from every conflict in their history, perfected the art of unconventional warfare, and weaponized chaos itself. And now, the galaxy was beginning to understand. Humanity was not here to survive. They were here to win. The Galactic Union struggled to make sense of what had just happened. The Zeltar Dominion had sent a battle group into the Sol system, expecting a swift and overwhelming victory. Instead, the fleet had been annihilated before it even had a chance to adapt. Survivors spoke of a battlefield that had defied all logic, a war fought with precision so exact that it felt like humanity had predicted their every move before the battle had even begun. But this was no anomaly. This was how humans fought. The Union's war strategists attempted to analyze the engagement, convinced that humanity's victory had been a fluke. Yet, every scenario they ran produced the same result. The humans didn't rely on overwhelming firepower or brute force. They thrived in unpredictability. Their strategies were fluid, ever-changing, adapting in real time to counter enemy movements before they could gain the upper hand. The next offensive was meant to crush humanity before they could capitalize on their victory. The Galactic Union assembled a larger, more coordinated fleet, one designed to counter the unconventional tactics that had devastated the Zeltar vanguard. The best military minds in the galaxy reviewed every known human battle doctrine and formulated countermeasures. This time, they would not underestimate them. But their plans were flawed from the start. They assumed humanity would fight the same battle twice. When the Union fleet arrived at the edge of human-controlled space, they found nothing. No planetary defenses in formation. No warships waiting to engage. Just empty space. At first, they believed humanity had retreated, choosing to abandon their holdings rather than fight a superior force. Then, one by one, their ships started vanishing. A battleship's engines flickered, then detonated from within. Another vessel suddenly found its weapon systems disabled, leaving it defenseless as an unseen force ripped through its hull. Communications were severed in an instant. Every attempt to regroup resulted in more casualties. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere at once. Panic spread as captains lost contact with their commanders. Commanders found their fleet movements disrupted by sudden sabotage. It wasn't a battle. It was slaughter. The Galactic Union had prepared for a war of tactics and countermeasures. Humanity had given them something else entirely: a war of deception, sabotage, and absolute control over the battlefield. Artificial intelligence operated entire squadrons with inhuman efficiency, predicting enemy movements before they happened. Stealth assault teams infiltrated Union ships, disabling critical systems before the enemy even realized they were boarded. Automated drones swarmed isolated vessels, overwhelming defenses in seconds. The Union had spent centuries perfecting traditional warfare, where clear battle lines and formations dictated the outcome. Humanity had abandoned those rules entirely. They fought without hesitation, without convention, without mercy. Every attempt to regroup was countered before it could even begin. Every fallback position became a death trap. The Union commanders issued desperate orders to retreat, but by then, it was already too late. The humans had never planned to hold the line. They had planned to dismantle their enemies piece by piece, until there was nothing left to fight. When the remnants of the shattered Union fleet limped back to their respective homeworlds, the truth became clear. Humanity wasn't waging war in the way the Union had expected. They weren't fighting for territory or for survival. They were fighting to win. The Galactic Union's most powerful warlords, once confident in their dominion over the lesser species, now questioned their own strength. The human war machine had proven to be more than a nuisance. It was a force capable of reshaping the balance of power across the stars. And worse, it wasn't just the Zeltar who were beginning to fear them. Other species, once aligned against humanity, hesitated. Some factions within the Union began to wonder whether they had chosen the wrong side. For the first time in centuries, the unshakable unity of the galaxy's ruling factions wavered. Because deep down, they all understood the same terrifying truth. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were dismantling an empire. The Galactic Union's War Council was in chaos. The reports were impossible to ignore. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were unraveling centuries of established military doctrine with terrifying efficiency. The Zeltar Dominion, once the galaxy's unchallenged enforcers, had suffered losses so catastrophic that their command structure was fracturing. Attempts to reinforce war-torn sectors ended in disaster. Supply lines were cut before reinforcements could arrive. Key generals vanished without a trace, victims of surgical strikes that left no evidence behind. Entire fleets went silent, their last transmissions filled with garbled messages of systems failing, ships turning against each other, and unseen enemies striking from the dark. The war was no longer about crushing humanity. It was about survival. The Galactic Union's strongest factions called for drastic measures. They proposed deploying planetary purging weapons, wiping out entire human colonies in a single, decisive stroke. But before such measures could be enacted, humanity struck first. The first attack came without warning. Deep within Zeltar-controlled space, a critical orbital shipyard, the backbone of the Dominion's fleet production, was annihilated in minutes. The station's defense systems never activated. Not because they failed, but because they had already been infiltrated weeks before. When the time came, they simply turned against their own forces. The next blow came at the heart of the Union itself. High command on the capital world of Valrun believed itself untouchable. It had never seen war firsthand. But when the alarms blared, it was already too late. Hundreds of human strike teams, deployed in secret over the preceding weeks, executed precision attacks on critical infrastructure. Power grids collapsed. Communication relays were severed. The very government of the Galactic Union, the force that had ruled for millennia, was left blind and isolated. Union leaders realized, too late, that this was never a war of brute force. It was a war of control. The tide had turned. The invincible war machine of the Galactic Union was bleeding, and humanity had no intention of letting it recover. The human president, silent since the war began, finally issued a single transmission. It was broadcast across every known system, translated into every language. You have a choice. Stand against us, and we will break you. Stand with us, and you may yet have a future. It was not a plea. It was a warning. The response was immediate. Some factions, still clinging to their pride, swore they would fight to the last. Others, seeing the writing on the wall, defected. The Galactic Union, once an unbreakable force, was now crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance. And humanity, once dismissed as insignificant, stood poised to claim victory over an empire that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. The Galactic Union was falling apart. What had begun as a campaign to crush a defiant species had spiraled into something far worse. A war they could no longer control. Entire sectors fell silent as planetary governors abandoned their posts, unwilling to waste resources fighting an enemy that seemed untouchable. Civil unrest spread like wildfire. Factions that had once stood united under the banner of galactic supremacy now turned on each other, scrambling for power in the growing void. Humanity had shattered the illusion of the Union's dominance, and the galaxy knew it. The facade of order that had held for millennia was crumbling, and with it, the arrogance that had led to this war in the first place. The old empires had relied on their numbers, their technology, their belief in their own superiority. None of it had mattered. Against an enemy that fought with precision, strategy, and relentless adaptability, they had been exposed for what they truly were: complacent, stagnant, and unprepared. The Zeltar Dominion, once the mightiest military force in the known universe, had been reduced to fragmented remnants. What little remained of their leadership had retreated into the depths of their own territory, desperately attempting to consolidate power before humanity reached them. But it was already too late. Their warships, once symbols of unstoppable conquest, were now nothing more than relics of an outdated doctrine, helpless against an enemy that struck before they could even react. And still, humanity did not stop. They had no interest in territorial conquest, no need for prolonged occupation. This war had never been about expansion, it had been about proving a point. The galaxy had mocked humanity, belittled them, dismissed them as insignificant. Now they understood the truth. Humanity had never been weak. They had simply been waiting. One by one, the remaining Union factions collapsed under the pressure. Some surrendered outright, seeking mercy before it was too late. Others attempted to resist, only to be dismantled with the same ruthless efficiency that had defined the war from the beginning. By the time the final strongholds fell, there was no grand final battle, no last stand. There was only inevitability. The Galactic Union ceased to exist. In its place, a new order emerged, not one ruled by humans, but one shaped by the lesson they had taught the galaxy. Strength was not measured in the size of one's fleet or the number of worlds they controlled. It was measured in the will to fight, the ability to adapt, and the refusal to bow. The human president, the man who had once stood before the galaxy's most powerful leaders and declared war with a simple statement, issued one final transmission. We did not seek this war. But we ended it. Remember that. There was no victory parade, no celebration. Humanity had no interest in ruling a broken empire. They had done what they needed to do. And now, as the dust settled and the survivors rebuilt, one truth remained. The age of human insignificance was over. And the galaxy would never forget it.